Hello, my name is Parke Wilde and I have a question. Does the United States have a cheap food policy? It is sometimes said that farm subsidies make unhealthy food too cheap. There are many things that make food in the United States unhealthy, and many things wrong with farm subsidies. But in this video, I want to offer some tools that will help you skeptically scrutinize whether U.S. farm subsidies are a cheap food policy. I begin with the premise that farmers have a good deal of influence over U.S. farm policy. And if there's one thing farmers agree on, it is a desire for higher food prices. I never met a farmer who wanted a cheap food policy. The issue is complex because there is not just one kind of farm policy. You may think you don't want all the arcane detail, but you may find it interesting to understand some of the distinctions. In this video, I want to tell you about no fewer than 7 distinct types of government interventions in the agricultural economy. Each of them has a different effect on farmers, on buyers, on the quantity produced and consumed. For several of these policies, the goal is to raise the agricultural price. Each of these policies has shortcomings, which is why farm policy is, well, so difficult. First, in traditional price supports, which were heavily used from the 1930s to the 1970s, the government offers to buy commodities at a target price which may be higher than the market price. This raises the price for farmers and for buyers, but it may lead to overproduction, causing trouble for the environment and several other difficulties. Second, to solve the problem of overproduction, the government has at times tried to control or restrain how much farmers produce. Or the government may use tariffs and quotas to restrict imports. Again, the goal is to raise the price for farmers and for buyers. Policy 2 was used heavily from the 1930s to the 1960s, in part to fix the consequences of Policy 1. This policy is still with us today in a subtler form, in the form of conservation programs, where farmers set aside land voluntarily. Third, to avoid having the government buy and store large stocks of commodity, deficiency payments pay farmers based on the difference between a market price and a target price. This policy, which was heavily used from the 1970s to the 1990s, is the best suspect if you want to argue that there is a cheap food policy, because it can suppress the market price. Like Policy 1, Policy 3 may cause overproduction. Fourth, to solve the problem of incentivizing overproduction by subsidizing based on how much farmers currently produce, direct payments were used from the 1990s until the first part of the current decade. They just pay farmers a fixed amount, supporting their income while explicitly trying not to influence market prices or encourage overproduction. These direct payments were politically popular in years when the commodity price was low, but they became unpopular in more recent years when commodity prices were generally higher, because politicians don't want to send direct payments to farmers in the same year that farmers are already earning a good price in the market. So, fifth, countercyclical payments are somewhat like direct payments, but they only pay farmers in years when the prices are low. Sixth, in recent years, a larger fraction of farm subsidy spending comes in the form of subsidized insurance. This raises farm incomes by compensating farmers under particular circumstances. Originally crop losses, but now innovative programs have other triggers for payouts as well. Finally, seventh, many U.S. agricultural policies seek to increase consumer demand. For example, U.S. biofuels policies support the use of corn in automobile fuel tanks, boosting consumer demand and raising the commodity price. Other programs, called commodity checkoff programs, support advertising and marketing under slogans such as beef, it's what's for dinner, and pork, the other white meat. As an economist in a nutrition school, I worry about these programs a fair amount and don't see why the federal government is in the business of encouraging Americans to eat more beef, pork, and cheese. But you can see that these programs are not part of a cheap food policy. Their whole point is to increase consumer demand and raise the price of food to help farmers. Having heard that there now are no fewer than 7 categories of farm policy interventions pulling prices in opposite directions, some of you may be throwing up your hands and saying, "What a mess!" And I tend to agree. But others of you intrepid souls may say to yourselves, okay, to understand the effect of these policies on balance, We will need to think quantitatively. And with this, I also agree. This chart shows changes over time on the horizontal axis in federal spending in billions of dollars on the vertical axis for some of these farm policies. You can see that total spending jumps around a lot in response to both farm policy and to changes in market prices. When the market price is low, as in 1999, the spending was more than $25 billion. When the price is high, as in 2010, farm subsidy spending is much lower. Some policies are responsive to the market price, but others, such as the direct payments in blue at the bottom, are more steady year after year, no matter what the market price, until these policies were ended just in the last Farm Bill in 2014 by the Congress's own choice. Some of what I've been saying may surprise you. If so, to learn the details, you may be interested in Chapter 2 on agricultural policy in the book Food Policy in the United States, whose second edition has just been published in 2018 by Taylor and Francis as part of the EarthScan Food and Agriculture series. Even if you think of economics as the dismal science, you may enjoy, in spite of it all, understanding the fundamentals of supply and demand in markets for an agricultural commodity such as corn that is subsidized by the federal government. The goal of this book is to stop leaving farm policy to the farm experts, but to open up this arcade field to a wider readership. So, does the United States have a cheap food policy? Though this video may be too short to fully persuade you, my answer for your contemplation is no, not mostly. There are many shortcomings to U.S. agricultural policy, but in years when U.S. food commodity prices are low, it is despite, not because of, several federal government interventions that seek to raise prices.